Yes, I am temporarily.
Okay. So the church is in America, and the church is actually now going through transition in America, right? There are many churches of Christ now that have departed from the doctrine and are doing some very strange things. There are churches that are conservative, and sometimes it can also be detrimental to their health, right? To whatever extreme you go, it can be very dangerous because you can be so conservative that there's no room for growth, and you can be so liberal that you grow too much. So there has to be a balance. When I traveled to the States some years ago, I've not well the last time I traveled was I went to Bermuda, but I went to the States probably. I think the last time I traveled to the States was about 2018 or 19, and I was privileged to visit a number of congregations, and some of the stuff that I saw going on at different congregations, it struck me. I mean, I was surprised because I am not used to that kind of thing in the Caribbean. So and so there are some congregations that are trying their best to stick to the straight and narrow, but some have become so liberal that you cannot recognize them. The difference between them and other and denominations that are out there. So it shows that we are going through this transition, and it is not the first time, and it certainly will not be the last time, right? A few years ago, Brother Kidu and myself were discussing the fact that it is going to be a reality that the churches that Americans would have supported will probably have to go back to America to help to restore the church in America,
True.
right? Because the transition is taking place, and if you travel enough throughout the states, you will see. No, nowadays you have black congregations and you have white congregations. I don't know, like we have a black heaven and a white heaven, right?
True.
You have congregations existing. You have a black congregation on one side of the street and a white congregation on the other side of the street, and the two don't mix. Then
Yes,
you have congregations that are predominantly Latino, you have congregations that are Haitians, and you have congregations that are mixed with everybody. So it's just a huge melting pot.
kind of like racism right, sir?
Yes, man. And by the way, don't think that it doesn't exist also in the Caribbean, right? In places like Trinidad, it might not be as prominent as in other places, but there is that kind of divide that exists throughout the Caribbean, but it doesn't exist based on race. It exists based on other stuff,
True.
right? We're right here within Jamaica. You have congregations. They have some that have head covering, some that don't, some that believe that you take the communion this way. There are others who believe that you don't. So everywhere that you go, it is just this everlasting contention of different issues that sometimes add to us departing from the faith as dictated by the Holy Scriptures. So this is one of the reasons why church history is important.
That is so true.
Mhm.
Recently, without cutting you short,
No,
one
man,
of
go ahead, no problem.
sister congregation allowed a woman to do a eulogy in a funeral service,
Mhm.
and was like, what is going on? You know.
So it is, and as a matter of fact, I'll hasten to say that as we go further into time, we are going to have even more challenges.
Yeah.
Because here's it now, we have a new generation of people in the church that don't necessarily hold to the things of the past. And then there are also certain doctrinal positions that we have had in the church that persons have now begun to explore and are now seeing things differently. And it is not that, because one of the things that we must understand, to have a different doctrinal position from the traditional position doesn't mean that the person who has the new view is wrong. It may also mean that what you have been doing traditionally has also been wrong. Because there are several things that within the church that we have practiced over the years that a lot of persons have not asked questions about, that people are not asking questions about, right? Take, for instance, let me give you an example. I know a congregation in the States that they only have one general Bible class. They don't have different Bible classes. They just have one general Bible class. The church doesn't have a kitchen because they don't believe in fellowship. right? So there's no, you know, churches that have eating areas for fellowship after church and so forth. They don't believe in that. And so there is a huge contention because that is what their leadership has been teaching over the years. So now you have a whole generation of persons in that congregation who are now asking questions as to why is it that we don't do these things. And when especially when the younger generation begin asking questions, they need answers, right? Because I have asked a question: if you don't have a kitchen on the church building because you think that is some scriptural position, then why have a bathroom? Because there's no doctrinal position that you can support to have a bathroom, right? Why do you have an office? If you're going to take that position, then the only thing that you should really have is the church building as a meeting space and nothing else. So people are not asking these kind of questions. And because we are asking these kind of questions, then it means that they need some answers. So it may not be important to everyone, but there are very valid reasons why a study of the history of the church is very, very relevant, right? You know, it helps us to appreciate, it helps us to confirm, and it helps us to explain the New Testament. Right? You know, one of my things as a student of church history, I have a better appreciation of the Church of Christ as the body of Christ and the only institution for the saved because of my studies in church history. Right? I have studied church history up to the master's level. And the more I dive into church history, I become convicted that the Bible is true. I become more convicted that there is only one true church, right? I become convicted that God dislikes denominationalism based on the stuff that I studied. And it helps me to confirm my own faith and to confirm that the Bible is indeed true. So another thing that it does is that, you know, it helps to demonstrate the path of departure from doctrine of the New Testament. It helps us to understand today's religious world and today's religious world views. If we live long enough in this world, we'll understand that there are just a myriad of views that are being contested in this world. Everywhere that you go, somebody believes something different, even within the Church of Christ. Somebody believes something different. This is not a new phenomenon. It is one that is as old as time. And as we go along, we will have more contention where these things are concerned. So one of the best things to do is to go back into the history of how things are and the history of how things were. And this in turn will help us to come to a better understanding of why we do the things that we do. All right. So, you know, learning how problems were solved or the consequences of not solving them, right? How to determine the eternal from the cultural. Again, that's another point I want to pick up. There are some things within the church that are purely based on culture, right? And sometimes culture can become the greatest barrier to progress. I don't know, have you ever heard in a congregation that this is how we have always done things?
Yes.
We have always done it this way. And because we have always done it this way, we can't do it any other way, even when it is not a doctrinal position. We do it this way because the minister who started the church, this is how he did it. And because the minister used to do it this way, this is how we are going to do it. And we will always continue to do it this way, even when there is another way to do it. All right? So we are going. So we see that we have many things. We have many things to contend with, which is why church history is always going to be a very important part of the life of the church. And I think that many times, we need to have more study or more studies of church history, not only from the setting of a preaching school, But I believe that we should have church study within the congregations to understand where we are coming from, why we do the things that we do. Because again, I strongly believe that a lot of people are losing their faith and going off into different places simply because they don't know the history which they are a part of. And we all know that history is important, right? History is important. And one of the things that makes history so important is that you have to understand history from the point of view of the people who experienced it, right? Now, if you look at world history, for instance, the history of Black people in this world is, from their point of view, different from somebody else who is telling their history. Because we see our history through a particular set of lenses, and other people see their history through a particular set of lenses. Let me give you an example. When I was growing up in school, all of our history books were written by Caucasians.
Yes.
All of our history books were written by persons who did not look like us, who saw history from one particular point. Now, our history has changed over time because persons who look like us are now doing research and finding out that history over the years have been distorted.
True.
So the history that we have now is so much different from the history that I would have grown up on 20 years ago. Because we are looking at things now from a totally different perspective, right? I had a discussion the other day, Sister Solomon, with one of my American friends, and who is a Black person who grew up in America, was born there. And I said to him that there's a dynamic within the history of Black persons in America and Black persons in the Caribbean that we often overlook. For Caribbean people, our perspective of racism is not the same as Black Americans born in America, right? And let me show you how far this goes. If I migrate from the Caribbean to America and I face racism, I have a choice of coming home.
Yes.
That's always my choice.
Yes.
The Black American who is born in America who faces racism does not have that choice.
No.
So how we view things are going to be totally different.
True.
How we feel about things is going to be different.
Yes.
And so that is why when you look at Black persons who are born in America versus Black persons who migrate to America, they have two different mentality. It's not the same.
True.
So we may share some of the same experiences, but our worldview of those experiences are not necessarily the same. If I travel to the States for 2 weeks and I face racism, I can always look forward to going home and not go back, right?
True.
The person who is born there and faces that kind of racism does not have that choice.
There's no.
They have to live with that experience.
True. True.
And so this is why history is so important. The person who understands the root of their history as a Christian has a better appreciation for the church than somebody who simply is just converted to Christ and is just not concerned about anything else, right? There is a greater appreciation. So church history, as I said, is important. I believe it is of utmost importance if the church is going to survive, right? We have to also remember that there are many theologians out there. Every denomination in this world have a theologian that writes from their own perspective. How are we going to contend with what those people are writing out and putting out if we are not putting out our own history, right? So it is important, and it's something that I believe it can't be overlooked, right? an enriched understanding and deeper sympathy to the struggles of the early church. Here is it, one of the things that we must also realize is that we are recipients of a particular legacy, right? The faith that we are a part of was bought with blood,
True.
sweat, and tears. And I believe many of us as Christians today are not convicted because we are not aware of these things. What we see today is our inheritance of years of struggle, years of persecution. When we talk about persecution today, we are talking about being uncomfortable, right? What we call persecution is just a state of being uncomfortable. We are not going through what the early church went through, where some of them had to literally die for their faith. Even within the context of where we reside today as Christians, it is not the same. A few years ago, I had a conversation with a brother, brother Lance Watson, who went to Nigeria to preach, and he had to be guarded day and night at his hotel to preach the gospel because Boko Haram was looking for him to kill him. In the Caribbean, we have not faced anything like that.
True.
So this is one of the reasons why many of us don't have that kind of appreciation for things that are spiritual, because it has really not cost us anything. And Jesus alludes to that fact that our faith must cost us something. So when what we talk about being, persecution in today's world, for many of us, that's nothing to do with persecution. That's to do with a state of discomfort for a little while, and that's all right. But our faith was bought with blood. When I look at Hebrews chapter 11, I think from 35 to the end, when the Bible names out the persons of faith, the fact that they were sawn in two, they were put to the sword, they were persecuted for they had to live in desert, wandering around in sheepskin and goatskin. And then I think verse 37 or 38 says, of whom the world was not worthy. Right? Yeah. These people who suffered for the cause of Christ, it says, of whom the world was not worthy. They were noted for their great faith. And then the same text goes on to say that God was not even willing to bless them apart from us, is that he delayed their blessing so that we could experience what salvation is. And they went through so much. So when we look at, when we understand that church history is important because there's a price for our faith. All right, there's a price for our faith. And this is what helps us to have a greater appreciation for the movement of the church history that we, we hold dear to. A study of church history will provide insight through analysis of personalities, situations, and outcomes of actions, so that we can better understand our own beliefs, faith, rituals, and so forth. It provides us with a better opportunity to respond to situations in the church today. We have to look at how things were back in those days, those early times. How did people respond to these particular situations compared to how we are going to respond to them today? Right? Remember, much of what we do in the church, we are looking at past. Right? We are looking at what was written before. We're looking at what we call the apostolic authority. How did these things funnel into the church so that when these issues come up today, we are in a better position to handle these things? Okay? Very important that we understand these things. So, I will look at the last slide here. So here's a time frame of church history. We have the ancient era, which is from about approximately 30 to 600 AD. We have what we call the ante-Nicene period from 100 to 325. We have the Nicene and post-Nicene church, which is 325 to 600. We have the medieval era, which is 600 to 1300. And then we have also within that context, we have the church under papal hierarchy, which is 1050 to about 1300. Then we have the Renaissance and Reformation, which is 1300 to 1600. We have the Protestant Reformation, which is 1500 to 650. And then we have the modern era, which is 1650 to present time. And this is an evolution. Today, we have over 6,000 documented denominations in the world and growing every day. I said in a sermon last week that not last week, some weeks ago, I was preaching that possibly the easiest business to start today is a church. Churches are being started all around us every day. And the more they start, is the more followers they find. And as we go along in our daily lives, it is going to get even worse. Because nobody today chooses even what to believe. You can just believe just about anything. You know, one man says that we have created God in our own image. Right? So if you look at some people's idea of who God is and what a relationship with Christ is, it has nothing to do with what God has instructed, but more to do what we have formulated in our minds. And so we want a religion that suits us, one that we can tailor to our suit, one that lessens our responsibility to God's commandments, our obedience, one that we can do just as we please and get away with it. That is where we are headed. So this is one of the reasons why church history is so very important. All right. So I'm going to end there for this morning in terms of my lecture. So you have one question for me to answer. The other one, I want you to do a 2-page, and this is going to demand some research from you now. Just a 2 pages on this group of persons. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes. Essenes is Essenes, 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 and the Zealots, Zealots. So the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Essenes, the Zealots. Just about one paragraph on each for your next session. Remember, after that hour is finished, you need to email everybody clear on what they are supposed to do?
Sir, about the group of persons, you said the Pharisees, the Essenes?
The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, and the Zealots. Who are these people? So you have an hour to work on that assignment after this class, and you email it to me. And then I will see you next week again for class.
Sir, can you just type in like the Pharisee, so and I can just spell it? The thing that you list, all for
See, Pharisees, hold on just a minute. Just a minute. I'm going to type it in. Here it is.
Okay.
All right, so have a good rest of the week.
All right, sir. So that's 2 page or 1 page on there.
2 pages.
All right, all right, all right.
All right, so have a good day. Signing off now.